Hello and welcome to this mini lecture in the Professional Communication course, and this is Module 5, which is on employment communication. So let's start by looking at the first topic in this module, which is about the cover letter. So we're going to look at all different types of document that you might need to use in attaining employment. And we'll start off with the cover letter. So learning objectives are to understand what the purpose is of a cover letter, to understand the layout and structure, and then to consider the content and style. So we'll try and cover everything about a cover letter in this presentation. So first of all, the purpose. If you don't know already, the basic fundamental purpose is to support an application for a job. So that would be along with perhaps an application form, and they would most likely request a CV. And those two things contain a lot of almost raw information. The cover letter is slightly different. It could be applying to an advertised vacancy, or it could be exploratory. So what that means is an advertised vacancy is a job listing that you've seen, nowadays most likely online, could traditionally have been in a newspaper, or however you've heard about this job post. You're applying for a specific vacancy. Exploratory means you're getting in touch with a business or an institution, and you're sending a cover letter and a CV and requesting if there's any positions available. So in the second example, it's probably all the more important because you're being tentative and trying to discover if there is a possibility of a hiring. And the audience, whenever we write any kind of text, we think very carefully about who the audience is. The audience is going to be the management of the company. If it's a smaller company, if it's a larger company, someone in HR, a hiring director. So you need to consider who that person is and how they're going to take the letter, how to persuade that person. The letter is one way, only one way of many, in which the candidate is assessed, along with, say, the interview, the application form, any other kind of tests they might do. But the cover letter especially is assessing your writing skills. So like I said, a CV, an application form, it's kind of plugging in raw information. Means is an advertised vacancy is a job listing that you've seen, nowadays most likely online, could traditionally have been in a newspaper, or however you've heard about this job post. You're applying for a specific vacancy. Exploratory means you're getting in touch with a business or an institution, and you're sending a cover letter and a CV and requesting if there's any positions available. So in the second example, it's probably all the more important because you're being tentative and trying to discover if there is a possibility of a hiring. And the audience, whenever we write any kind of text, we think very carefully about who the audience is. The audience is going to be the management of the company. If it's a smaller company, if it's a larger company, someone in HR, a hiring director. So you need to consider who that person is and how they're going to take the letter, how to persuade that person. The letter is one way, only one way of many, in which the candidate is assessed, along with, say, the interview, the application form, any other kind of tests they might do. But the cover letter especially is assessing your writing skills. So like I said, a CV, an application form, it's kind of plugging in raw information. The cover letter is a chance to test your writing skill, and depending on the role you're going to, they're going to use that as part of their evaluation. Okay, so next, let's look at the layout and structure of the cover letter. Since this is a formal text, it must be well organized. So this isn't an informal, text message that you're sending to a friend or relative. It's a formal text. We want to really persuade the audience, and the audience is, in a professional context, it's going to be someone fairly high up. So it must be well organized and well structured. So probably nowadays that's going to be a digital word processed document. But if you are sending it the kind of old-fashioned way via post, make sure the addresses are placed in the correct points and that they contain the correct information. Less of an issue nowadays if it's electronic. And then in general, whether it's digital or handwritten, your cover letter should follow the conventions of a formal letter. So that means things like having a greeting, which would be dear sir or madam, or to whom it may concern. An introduction where you lay out the purpose, so I'm writing this letter in order to... then you'd have your main body paragraphs, and each paragraph would touch upon a different aspect or element of your experience or your qualifications, and then finish with a conclusion. A conclusion should have some kind of call to action, so something like, please, I look forward to your response, or please find my application attached, or please, write back to me or call me back on this number. Give the conclusion is the last thing they read, so give them something to do instead of just putting your cover letter in the pile. And then a sign off, which would be, in a formal letter, something either yours sincerely or yours faithfully, plus your name and a signature. If you don't know, sincerely is what if you know the name of the person you're writing to, because you're being sincere, because you know them. So if it's Mr. or Mrs. or whatever with a name, you know that person, use sincerely. And it's always good if you can to do a bit of research online, and if you can find the name of the manager or the hiring director, to mention their name specifically, shows a bit of initiative, gives it that personal touch. If you can't find out, and sometimes that information isn't publicly available, then just stick with to whom it may concern, or dear sir, madame, and then yours faithfully at the end. So because it's a formal letter you're trying to impress, it is worthwhile to get these details correct and to be quite careful. So next, we'll look at the content and the style of a cover letter. So we sort of start off from the almost theoretical, what's the purpose, the general layout. Now we're getting a bit more into the nitty-gritty. So the cover letter should be written in a formal register as opposed to informal. Because of the onus, because of the purpose, it should be formal English. As I said, where possible, address it to a named person, or if you can't, use sir, madame, or the madam or hiring manager. Stay brief. As I'll probably mention again in the CV video, people apparently tend to look at a CV on average for 30 seconds. So if the people you're writing to are under a lot of time pressure and possibly quite stressed, so unless there is in the brief, it's called for to be a certain length, probably one side is always going to be enough, especially if it's typed. Obviously state what opportunity you're writing for, so in your introduction, your purpose, I'm applying for the position of blah, blah, blah. I will be suitable for this position because... demonstrate your knowledge of the company and sector, so especially of the company itself, so why you would be a good fit for that particular company, and show that you understand something about the ethos and the philosophy of that company, and also more broadly about the sector, that you're keeping up to date with the developments and the news in the sector, and you have a good knowledge of that, and any way you can evidence and demonstrate that in your writing is important. And then also tailor the information from your resume to match the role you're applying for, and always write a specific letter for each position. So it's possible you can use the same resume or CV because of multiple posts, but you should write an individual letter, or at least have a default boilerplate standard letter for a particular role, and then change it for each particular sector, and then tailor it for each role, because there's always going to be little things that that particular role demands, and if they get the impression this is a generic letter, they might think that you're not willing to put in the effort and attention to detail that role might require. So always demonstrate your knowledge. Is going to be the management of the company, if it's a smaller company, if it's a larger company. company, someone in HR, a hiring director. So you need to consider who that person is and how they're going to take the letter, how to persuade that person. The letter is one way, only one way of many, in which the candidate is assessed, along with, say, the interview, the application form, any other kind of tests they might do. But the cover letter especially is assessing your writing skills. So like I said, a CV, an application form, it's kind of plugging in raw information. The cover letter is a chance to test your writing skill. And depending on the role you're going to, they're going to use that as part of their evaluation. Okay, so next, let's look at the layout and structure of the cover letter, part of their evaluation. Okay, so next, let's look at the layout and structure of the cover letter. CV, an application form, it's kind of plugging in raw information. The cover letter is a chance to test your writing skill, and depending on the role you're going to, they're going to use that as part of their evaluation. Okay, so next, let's look at the layout and structure of the cover letter. Since this is a formal text, it must be well organized. So this isn't an informal, text message that you're sending to a friend or relative. It's a formal text. We want to really persuade the audience, and the audience is, in a professional context, it's going to be someone fairly high up. So it must be well organized and well structured. So probably nowadays that's going to be a digital word process document. But if you are sending it the kind of old-fashioned way via post, make sure the addresses are placed in the correct points and that they contain the correct information. Less of an issue nowadays if it's electronic. And then in general, whether it's digital or handwritten, your cover letter should follow the conventions of a formal letter. So that means things like having a greeting, which would be dear sir or madam, or to whom it may concern. An introduction where you lay out the purpose. So I'm writing this letter in order to. Then you'd have your main body paragraphs, and each paragraph would touch upon a different aspect or element of your experience or your qualifications. And then finish with a conclusion. A conclusion should have some kind of call to action. So something like, please, I look forward to your response, or please find my application attached, or please, write back to me or call me back on this number. Give the conclusion is the last thing they read, so give them something to do instead of just putting your cover letter in the pile. And then a sign-off, which would be, in a formal letter, something either yours sincerely or yours faithfully, plus your name and a signature. If you don't know, sincerely is for if you know the name of the person you're writing to, because you're being sincere, because you know them. So if it's Mr. or Mrs. or whatever with a name, you know that person, use sincerely. And it's always good if you can to do a bit of research online, and if you can find the name of the manager or the hiring director, to mention their name specifically, shows a bit of initiative, gives it that personal touch. If you can't find out, and sometimes that information isn't publicly available, then just stick with to whom it may concern, or dear sir, madame, and then yours faithfully at the end. So because it's a formal letter you're trying to impress, it is worthwhile to get these details correct and to be quite careful. So next, we'll look at the content and the style of the cover letter. So we sort of start off from the almost theoretical, what's the purpose, the general layout. Now we're getting a bit more into the nitty-gritty. So a letter, or dear sir, madame, and then yours.
Document introduction report main body paragraph graph conclusion awesome call to action of sincerely faithful signature.
Because it's a formal letter, you're trying to impress, it is worthwhile to get these details correct and to be quite careful. So next, we'll look at the content and the style of a cover letter. So we sort of start off from the almost theoretical, what's the purpose, the general layout. Now we're getting a bit more into the nitty gritty. So the cover letter should be written in a formal register as opposed to informal. Because of the onus, because of the purpose, it should be formal English. As I said, where possible, address it to a named person, or if you can't use sir, madame, or the madam or hiring manager. Stay brief. As I probably mentioned again in the CV video, people apparently tend to look at a CV on average for 30 seconds. So if the people you're writing to are under a lot of time pressure, possibly quite stressed. So unless and to there's a in the brief it's called for to be a certain length. Probably one side is always going to be enough, especially if it's typed. Obviously state what opportunity you're writing for. So in your introduction, your purpose, I'm applying for the position of blah blah blah. I will be suitable for this position because. Demonstrate your knowledge of the company and sector, so especially of the company itself, so why you would be a good fit for that particular company, and show that you understand something about the ethos and the philosophy of that company, and also more broadly about the sector, that you're keeping up to date with the developments and the news in the sector, and you have a good knowledge of that, and if any way you can evidence and demonstrate that in your writing is important. And then also tailor the information from your resume to match the role you're applying for. And always write a specific letter for each position. So it's possible you could use the same resume or CV because of multiple posts, but you should write an individual letter, or at least have a default boilerplate standard letter for a particular role, and then change it for each particular sector, and then tailor it for each role, because there's always going to be little things that that particular role demands, and if they get the impression this is a generic letter, they might think that you're not willing to put in the effort and attention to detail that role might require. So always demonstrate your knowledge of that particular role and that particular company. Another thing, it's not enough to tell the reader your attributes and skills. You must show when you made use of them. So anyone can say, I'm a team worker, I'm hardworking, I'm detail-oriented, etc. It's better to say, I'm a hard worker and I worked extremely hard on this particular project where I achieved these results. Or I'm detail-oriented, and one time this was useful was when I was assigned to this project, and by noticing this detail, I managed to save the company X amount of money. Because anyone can say, I am X, I am Y, I am Z, but if you give an example when you did those things, that's going to be a lot more persuasive. Okay, so let's talk now in a bit more detail about paragraphs. Be confident and sell yourself. Well, I'm detail-oriented.
Address to name. Named person. ठंडा हाथ काम कर रही है वर्षन सर या मैडम और hearing manager manager oh
pushback here. It's not too long at all, actually. Yeah, thank you.
Time this was useful was when I was assigned to this project, and by noticing this detail, I managed to save the company X amount of money, because anyone can say I am X, I am Y, I am Z, but if you give an example of when you did those things, that's going to be a lot more persuasive. Okay, so let's talk now in a bit more detail about paragraphs. Be confident and sell yourself. And grammatically speaking, one way of doing that is by using the first person pronoun I. So obviously, you want to say you're a team player.
We can pregame? Yeah, in here. Like, maybe go for a little cruise around the neighborhood real quick. No one's here yet.
Probably have been working in teams, but this is a time where you just focus on yourself and your achievements, and don't worry about highlighting other people. And once.
Also, since it was such a long ride, here's a tip for you.
Technique which is advised a lot is the star technique.
It was a long one, I know.
So each of these letters stands for something. So you mentioned, what was the situation? Was it in education or work?
Yeah. We make great videos. So
what was a task? What was the challenge or responsibility you took on? What's the action that you did?
What's your name?
And how did that action go? And then what was the result of that action? So again, this is how you X amount of. Anyone can say, I am X, I am Y, I am Z. But if you give it.
We didn't want to stumble into the neighbor's house. Well, check out That Was Epic on YouTube.
It was my birthday yesterday.
Yesterday? Well, happy birthday, Francesca.
कहाँ का है ये?
Hey, what you guys talking about and shit? What's up? What you guys talking about? Oh, I'm just trying to make friends. Sorry if I came on strong. My name's Scrappy, homie. Ashton, nice to meet you and shit. Where you from? Órale, pues, güey. I used to live in North Dakota. I live in Bismarck. You guys do construction and shit over there? That's what's up, homie. What's up, what? Now I'm just super embarrassed.
That's okay.
Yeah, that was
a biochem lab report.
That's it. Yeah, that's the type I'm going for. Alright guys, so we're gonna shout out the first location on Instagram right now, and if you are just now hearing about literally first person to find me gets $1,000. This is not the hint. The next story is gonna be the hint. It's just gonna be a photo. That's giving away nothing, right? That's too easy. Everyone in Tempe knows this bar. This is gonna be the easiest one, I think. And they're gonna get harder. That was fast. Gentlemen. Dude. Hell yeah. You just missed the winner.
What?
Yeah.
No.
I'm so sorry. Wait, are you guys together? Oh.
I saw him pull up too, and I was like,
Damn, so you guys didn't come together? You both just. Oh, he was. Yeah. No, I'm kidding, dude. But he was here first, though. Oh. You can have all the cash in my wallet just for being a split second after the winner.
I literally saw these buildings. I was like, hold up. I think that's the white claw at the bar.
Dude, yeah, I told you guys. Like,
your glasses, bro. I was like, that's some.
oh, wait. Like, glasses had a reflection?
Yeah. That building, I was like, I know that.
We gotta be a little sneakier.
Right there. I was like, I know it's
Genius. Dude, I literally gave it completely away. It's giving away nothing, right? That's awesome. Well, we're gonna be doing this all day, so make sure you get right after him. I gave him.
around that corner so quick. You would have ran right into him. Oh, man, that's funny. Team guys, have fun. I'm gonna have to watch you keep up on it.
Yes.
No, I'm into it. Nice.
We're not even gonna say anything. We're just gonna leave. Yeah, we love Marge. We've known her for a long time, and she was super dope to let us do this here. She's always said that we could film it if we wanted to, so I'm surprised for you, Marge.
Bye. Have fun. Shut up. Nuh-uh. I'm not part of your game. No.
No, there's no game. I just wanted to hook up our favorite bartender with a tip, you know? We were trying to get out of here before you saw it, but.
I'm not gonna cry on this game.
No.
I love you guys.
Oh, you too, Marge. Oh, you're so welcome. We'll come back to see you soon.
I got your eardrum.
Oh, you did? Which one? All right. You're down for anything, huh? Really embarrassing pickle.
I appreciate it. Yeah, sorry guys. Have a good one.
Her friend is smirking like that. Like, she she's laughing. All her friends are laughing too. I'm Ethan. Nice to meet you. What are you guys doing? Desserts? I'll buy dessert if I get your number. This one's fucking hilarious.
Do you want to buy dessert?
I will come back then. Yeah, it was nice meeting you guys. A boyfriend nowadays, I guess. We're gonna try to make sure the next one works for him. So the next one's gonna be, you're so hot, I'd burn every chair on earth, and you have to sit on my face. There we go. I was just saying, you were so hot that if I could, I would burn every chair on earth, so you'd have to sit on my face.
Oh my god.
Hi, I'm Ethan.
I'm
Nice to
Emily.
meet you. Awesome.
What's your major?
I'm undecided. I'm gonna. That was perfect. It was great. That's actually an offensive pickup line. I know, it is. I'm glad she didn't take it too seriously.
Anyways,
It worked, and $300
Thank you.
and a girlfriend.
have you been doing lately?
There's like people
Giving it to you
accepting it. Sure.
in this neighborhood?
That sounds trustworthy. I live here. This is my family's house.
Okay.
To give it to everybody else if he always over at first try. Really? Okay. Will you help me?
An example of when you did those things, that's going to be a lot more persuasive. Okay, so let's talk now in a bit more detail about paragraphs. Be confident and sell yourself. And grammatically speaking, one way of doing that is by using the first person pronoun I. So obviously you want to say you're a team player and you probably have been working in teams, but this is a time where you just focus on yourself and your achievements and don't worry about highlighting other people. And one technique which is advised a lot is the star technique. So each of these letters stands for something. So you mentioned, what was the situation? Was it in education or work? What was a task? What was the challenge or responsibility you took on? What's the action that you did? And how did that action go? And then what was the result of that action? So examples of things when you things, not in a generic, I'm a team player because I work well in teams. Well, in what situation and what task and what action did that happen? And then you have something concrete that really shows that you can do those things. So here we can have a look at a couple of paragraphs and compare them. So the first one, I'm a hard-working and dedicated employee. I always give 100% and have achieved many successes in my various roles. I would make an excellent member of your team. It's not poorly written, but there's no examples, no evidence of those things. Here's an alternative with some invented examples. During 2018, I worked as a telesalesperson for ad marketing. During this time, I showed my dedication by volunteering to take time in the management experience scheme. This gave me the opportunity to shadow my line manager. Also, during this employment, I achieved the second highest sales rate in my team. I would love to improve my skills by. So here, the first paragraph says they're dedicated. Here, I show how that dedication played out in reality.
रजाई में जाल तैरी है। रजाई में जाल तैरी है तो जो बेसमों ने उनकी क्या हुई हैं? ठंड ज़्यादा ही पड़ेगी क्या?
Here, there's a concrete success given about being the second highest salesperson. So we're moving from generic to concrete examples of when you've done the things that you claim. Okay, so that covers this short presentation on cover letters. Just to recap what we discussed, the purpose is to support your application and to put into writing and to also show your writing ability and be persuasive about that particular role of why you should have that position. We talked about the layout and the structure. It's a formal letter. It has quite a restricted conventional structure, and in this case you should really follow that quite closely to show you have attention to detail and that you care. The content and the style, again, formal English, using I, giving examples, explaining why you're suited to the role. So thank you very much for watching this presentation, and I will see you in the next one.
Employment interaction.
Hello and welcome to the second video in the Employment Communication series, Employment Communication 2, and now we are looking at the resume as our next document you might need in securing your employment. So the learning objectives for this video to understand the purpose of a resume, to understand the layout and structure of a resume, and then to consider the content and style. So we're using a very similar structure to the previous video when we were looking at a cover letter, but this time we're looking at a slightly different document, although both are part and parcel of the same process of finding a job and attaining that job. So what is the purpose of a resume? It's to give an overview of your education and employment history. Those are two most key areas. A couple of other areas are also possible to mention, but mainly your education and your employment history. Something to bear in mind is that employers may receive hundreds or even thousands, potentially, of resumes for each role that they advertise, and these people are under a lot of time pressure and general deadlines and stress. So you need to really communicate your information as quickly and clearly as possible. They may have to glance at each for 30 seconds or less, and there is a little bit of research out there if you want to search for it, citing this, that it tends to be the average time is 30 seconds taking a glance at a resume. So they have a stack this big and they need to choose 10. They're going to flip through them quite quickly saying yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. So you need to be able to make a really clear impact in a short time period with your resume, and hopefully get into that short list to be considered for interview. So the point of saying all that is that it's vital to provide information in the clearest way possible. So the last thing you want is a huge to understand the layout and structure of a resume, and then to consider the content and style. So we're using a very similar structure to the previous video when we were looking at a cover letter, but this time we're looking at a slightly different document, although both are part and parcel of the same process of finding a job and attaining that job. So what is the purpose of a resume? It's to give an overview of your education and employment history. Those are two most key areas. A couple of other areas are also possible to mention, but mainly your education and your employment history. Something to bear in mind is that employers may receive hundreds or even thousands, potentially, of resumes for each role that they advertise, and these people are under a lot of time pressure and general deadlines and stress. So you need to really communicate your information as quickly and clearly as possible. They may have to glance at each for 30 seconds or less, and there is a little bit of research out there if you want to search for it, citing this, that it tends to be the average time is 30 seconds taking a glance at a resume. So they have a stack this big and they need to choose 10. They're going to flip through them quite quickly saying yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. So you need to be able to make a really clear impact in a short time period with your resume, and hopefully get into that shortlist to be considered for interview. So the point of saying all that is that it's vital to provide information in the clearest way possible. So the last thing you want is a huge page of text. Even your cover letter shouldn't look like that, but especially not your resume. So the best advice usually is to write a simple and clear resume of no more than 2 sides, because again, people are not going to have time to glance through it. So it's an overview of what you've done in the most clearest and broken down way possible. However, especially, just to know, I did say usually, if you work in creative industries, there are other kinds of CV available, which I'm not really going to talk about today, but there's like e-portfolios and interactive and videos and using various kinds of website and blog. My advice for those is, if you work in a sector that is about graphic design or coding or video production, and there are different ways of doing things in that sector. You're probably already aware of this, but I would say for 90% of jobs, typical kind of office or business jobs, they will want a standard paper resume. But just be aware there are other types, and you probably already know if that would be appropriate to the sector you're interested in. So what should a resume contain? We've already said it should be something like your employment and education history. But let's look at this in a bit more detail. So it should be any of the pertinent information about you. Contact details is an obvious one. advice for those is if you work in a sector that is about graphic design or coding or video production, and there are different ways of doing things in that sector, you're probably already aware of this. But I would say for 90% of jobs, typical kind of office or business jobs, they will want a standard paper resume. But just be aware there are other types, and you probably already know if that would be appropriate to the sector you're interested in. So what should a resume contain? We've already said it should be something like your employment and education history. But let's look at this in a bit more detail. So it should be any of the pertinent information about you. Contact details is an obvious one. It's up to you how much you want to share, but I would put my kind of general address. Doesn't need to be a specific street address. In the first instance, at least, a contact telephone number, an email address. And nowadays you might have a Twitter or a LinkedIn, professional social media networks. Nice thing to have is your career objectives and a quick summary at the top, just to say, for instance, mine would say something like, I've been working in education for so long, and just give a general overview of what your sector is and what you want to do in 2 or 3 sentences. So someone can glance and say, boom, right, okay, this is relevant or not relevant. Your education, and again, depending on how long you've been in education and the sector you're in, does it matter having your primary or secondary qualifications, or do you cut off at maybe post-16 and university level? And obviously, if you go up to having a master's, PhD, etc. So if we're thinking about what to include, think about what's relevant for that position, because it might not need to know everything you got in primary or secondary school. Employment history is probably the most important part. Have each job title, where the job was, what the duration in months or years, and a quick
चलिए
Hello and welcome to the second video in the employment communication. I would put my kind of at the top, going in reverse chronological order. Like I've been with interactive. Videos and using various kinds of website and blog. my advice for those is if you work in a sector that is about graphic design or coding or video production, and there are different ways of doing things in that sector, you're probably already aware of this. But I would say for 90% of jobs, typical kind of office or business jobs, they will want a standard paper resume. But just be aware there are other types, and you probably already know if that would be appropriate to the sector you're interested in. So what should a resume contain? We already said it should be something like your employment and education history. But let's look at this in a bit more detail. So it should be any of the pertinent information about you. Contact details is an obvious one. It's up to you how much you want to share, but I would put my kind of general address. Doesn't need to be a specific street address. In the first instance, at least, a contact telephone number, an email address, and nowadays you might have a Twitter or a LinkedIn, professional social media networks. Nice thing to have is your career objectives and a quick summary at the top, just to say, for instance, mine will say something like, I've been working in education for so long, and just give a general overview of what your sector is and what you want to do in 2 or 3 sentences, so someone can glance and say, boom, right, okay, this is relevant or not relevant. Your education, and again, depending on how long you've been in education and the sector you're in, does it matter having your primary or secondary qualifications, or do you cut off at maybe post 16 and university level? And obviously, if you go up to having a master's, PhD, etc. So if we're thinking about what to include, think about what's relevant for that position, because it might not need to know everything you got in primary or secondary school. Employment history is probably the most important part. Have each job title, where the job was, what the duration in months or years, and a quick short summary of your roles and responsibilities. And remember, that's your place to show off. And that would usually be with the most recent, same with education, the most recent at the top, going in reverse chronological order. Other things people might have done is volunteering, doing unpaid voluntary work, say the charity sector, which is always going to look good on a resume. Are you a member of any professional bodies, especially if you're working in, say, medicine or accounting, these kind of professions, dentistry, tend to have professional bodies. You might be inactive or some kind of member. And then training and CPD. So your education would usually be your schooling as a young person and higher education. But since you've been in employment, have you done any training? And some very typical ones in the UK are things on like health and safety, first aid, things like that might be useful to mention, or again specific to your sector. And another thing, what skills and attributes do you have as a person? And like I said, as I said in the cover letter video, listing lots of really positive attributes like hardworking, detail-oriented, team player might look great, but have you backed that up with the evidence that you are those things? Because it's easy for anyone to claim they are those things. And then you might want to mention a bit about you as a person. Obviously, not your life story or all your hobbies and interests, but just a little flavour of, what do you do in your free time, a sport, maybe just a couple of things just to say, I am a human being and I am the kind of person you might want to employ and be spending time with. And again, like I said, you should edit and customise your resume for each role. It won't be as time-consuming as a cover letter, which you might almost need to rewrite large sections of. It's more a case of priorities of what information you highlight and what you cut out when it comes to a resume. So you might want to have a standard full resume with almost everything in it, which might be 2 or 3 pages, and then for each role, cut that down to just 1 or 2 sides of the most relevant things. Okay, layout and structure of a resume. It shouldn't have lots of long sentences and especially not long developed paragraphs. Detail-oriented, team player. Might look great. because it's easy for anyone to claim they are those things. And then you might want to mention a bit about you as a person. Obviously, not your life story or all your hobbies and interests, but just a little flavour of, what do you do in your free time, a sport, maybe just a couple of things just to say, I am a human being and I am the kind of person you might want to employ and be spending time with.
इतना ही गर्म हो गया मैं तो यहाँ
And
पे
again, like I said, you
दिल्ली
should
जा
edit
रहा
and
है
customize your resume for each role. It won't be as time consuming as a cover letter, which you might almost need to rewrite large sections of. It's more a case of priorities of what information you highlight and what you cut out when it comes to a resume. So you might want to have a standard full resume with almost everything in it, which might be 2 or 3 pages. And then for each role, cut that down to just 1 or 2 sides of the most relevant things. Okay, layout and structure of a resume. It shouldn't have lots of long sentences and especially not long developed paragraphs. Instead, you need to use the layout to make information easy to find. So it's quite similar to the report we talked about in terms of how things are structured on the page and being able to quickly find, because it's not likely that someone's going to start at the top, go left to right, and read the whole thing cover to cover. They're probably going to go, right, do they have this qualification? How long have they worked? Okay, boom, looks good. Or, sorry, not this time. So you're going to use the typical layout features we have talked about before. So that's things like headings, subheadings, lists, and sections to create a kind of nested, logical structure. And that structure, what kind of structure? There's a few different options. It could be chronological over time, usually reverse, so starting with the most recent, going to earlier. It could be functional by skills area, so you might want to divide it up into different skills or different experience that you've had and keep.
Mama को मत बताना प्लीज.
ठीक है मैं मतलब एक्स्ट्रा तो वीडियो बनी
And keep all the accounting qualification and education here, and if you have HR here, keep those things separate. If you kind of have a split career, or have a combination of the above. So again, it's down to what suits you and your experience and what suits the sector that you're applying to. I think reverse chronological is usually the most common. Okay, next we come to writing your resume. Good, or sorry, not this time. So you're going to use the typical layout features. Okay, layout and structure. Employee and be spending time with. And again, like I said, you should edit and customize your resume for each role. It won't be as time consuming as a cover letter, which you might almost need to rewrite large sections of. It's more a case of priorities of what information you highlight and what you cut out when it comes to a resume. So you might want to have a standard full resume with almost every.
कितना हो गया 5:19 हो गई सोना नींद आ रही है नींद सो लो क्या है रात में तो फिर जगना ही है वैसे रात अच्छी है न सुर करा इतना है member degree. Customize.
In it, which might be 2 or 3 pages, and then for each role, cut that down to just 1 or 2 sides of the most relevant things. Priorities of what information you highlight and what you cut out when it comes to a resume. So you might want to have a standard full resume with almost everything in it, which might be 2 or 3 pages, and then for each role, cut that down to just 1 or 2 sides of the most relevant things. Okay, layout and structure of a resume. It shouldn't have lots of long sentences and especially not long developed paragraphs. Instead, you need to use the layout to make information easy to find. So it's quite similar to the report we talked about in terms of how things are structured on the page and being able to quickly find, because it's not likely that someone's going to start at the top, go left to right, and read the whole thing cover to cover. They're probably going to go, right, do they have this qualification? How long they worked? Okay, boom, looks good. Or, sorry, not this time. So you're going to use the typical layout features we have talked about before. So that's things like headings, subheadings, lists, and sections to create a kind of nested, logical structure. And that structure, what kind of structure? There's a few different options. It could be chronological over time, usually reverse, so starting with the most recent, going to earlier. It could be functional by skills area, so you might want to divide it up into different skills or different experience that you've had, and keep all the accounting qualification and education here, and if you have HR here.
Not huge. ठंड में उधर जहाँ चलना है
their things separate. You kind of have a split career, or have a combination of the above. So again, it's down to what suits you and your experience and what suits the sector that you're applying to. I think reverse chronological is usually the most common. Okay, next we come to writing your resume. Again, like we saw in the cover letter, using positive language and using the first person, so that's the I, because you're showing your achievements. So you're the star of the show. And to use what we could call powerful verbs, not just generic things that I did, but accomplished, created, established, implemented, etc. Really, really specific particular verbs showing a particular skill or achievement. So here's just a little example paragraph. That's the name of the place.
Use post-it.
Work in London between these dates. I worked as a salesperson, I volunteered for the Management Fast Track Programme, I achieved 20% rise in sales. So this is like a small summarised version of what appeared in the cover letter. And even that is probably pushing it in quite long, depending on how many roles you've had. You could even reduce that down to bullet points if you push for space. Okay, next a few tips, just general tips which kind of don't fit into a category for an effective resume, because I'm sure lots of you already have a resume and are aware of the basics. Just to note, I would probably normally call it a CV. That's a more common phrase in the UK. So bear that in mind. That's kind of a cross-cultural difference thing we've been talking about. But yeah, resume, curriculum vitae, or CV all mean the same thing. Tell the truth, better than being found out later. So just be honest, and bear in mind that a lot of the time an employer might like your attitude and your willingness to improve rather than thinking you're the final product. And if you claim to be the final product and you're not, you will eventually be found out, and that's going to be bad for your reputation. So be honest about where you are in your career. Be prepared to explain gaps in employment history. That often comes up. If there is a gap which is not included, just either have a note that you are able to explain, and have that explanation ready, because it doesn't always look good if you've had a long period of unemployment, but employers should be understanding. It's not always in your control. Don't include too much personal information. I'm speaking about the UK legally. You wouldn't be normal or encouraged to have a photograph, for instance, because that could lead to an employer discriminating against you. So things like your age, your sex, if you have a disability, your religion, ethnic group, those things shouldn't be mentioned because they're not relevant and it can fall foul of discrimination law. So stick to just the employment history and the kind of more objective information about you and your education experience. I already mentioned this, but obviously nowadays, keep links to those as well, and some people prefer that, and some places might just say use your LinkedIn or whatever of a social network instead of a traditional CV. Having printed copies, stick a few in your bag wherever you go, and you never know, you might be able to hand one out to someone. And also use PDFs